"You are a disgrace to this family." That's what she said to me. Not in a whisper, not behind closed doors. She said it at the dinner table, with 8 people sitting right there, passing the bread rolls and pretending they hadn't heard. I remember the sound of a fork scraping against a plate. I remember my husband's hand going still on the glass. I remember the way the candles flickered, like even the fire in that room flinched. And I remember thinking, very quietly, very clearly, okay, so that's how we're doing this. My name is Madison. I'm 29 years old. I'm a light-skinned Black woman who grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I married into a family that never quite knew what to do with me. Not because I was difficult, not because I caused problems, but because I existed in a space they hadn't prepared for, and instead of preparing for it, they decided the problem was me. I want you to stay with me through this story, because it doesn't end where you think it ends. It ends somewhere much quieter and much more powerful than anything I could have planned on my own. But before I get there, if you're new here and you found this video, please subscribe and hit that notification bell right now. Because the story I'm about to tell you is the kind that unfolds in layers, and I don't want you to miss a single part of what came next. Now let me take you back to the beginning. I met Daniel at a conference in Atlanta. He was funny, he was sharp, he had this way of listening to you like you were the only person in the room. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. I met his mother, Gloria, about 3 months into our relationship, and I want to be honest with you. The first meeting wasn't terrible. She was polite, stiff, but polite. She asked me questions about my family, my job, where I went to school. I answered everything without hesitation. I had nothing to hide. But somewhere between that first meeting and the engagement, something shifted. Or maybe it didn't shift at all. Maybe I just stopped being a possibility she was evaluating and became a reality she had to deal with. And Gloria did not deal with reality well when it wasn't the reality she had planned. The comments started small. They always do. "Madison, I noticed you rearranged the living room. Daniel grew up with it the other way. He's probably used to that." "Madison, I hope you're not one of those girls who keeps her husband away from his family." "Madison, your hair looks different. Is that a new style?" "I'm sure Daniel likes it. He's always been open-minded." That last one she said with a smile. The kind of smile that's doing a lot of work. The kind that's carrying something too heavy for just a smile. I let it go. Every single time I let it go. Not because I was weak, not because I didn't understand exactly what was being said underneath those words, but because I had made a decision early on that I was not going to be the woman who caused drama in Daniel's family. I was going to be steady. I was going to be consistent. I was going to build something that could not be torn down by a comment at a dinner table or a look across a kitchen. What I didn't fully understand yet was that some people read steadiness as submission. Some people look at a woman who doesn't fight back and decide that means they can push harder. Gloria was one of those people. She started coming over without calling first. She had a key. Daniel had given it to her years before we got married. For emergencies, he said. But Gloria's definition of emergency was very different from mine. She would let herself in on a Tuesday afternoon while I was working from home and act genuinely confused when I seemed surprised to see her. "I just wanted to drop something off for Daniel," she would say, walking past me into the kitchen like I was a piece of furniture. "Don't mind me." I minded. I minded every single time. But I smiled and I offered her coffee and I kept my thoughts exactly where they were, inside my own chest, where they couldn't be used against me. Then came the family dinners. Gloria hosted them every other Sunday, and attendance was not optional. That wasn't said out loud, but it didn't need to be. The whole family operated on this unspoken system of obligation, and showing up late or skipping without a hospital-level excuse was the kind of thing that got talked about for months. So I went. Every other Sunday, I put on something nice. I brought something, a dessert, a bottle of wine, flowers, and I sat at that table and I participated and I smiled and I was good. I was so good. And still, every single dinner, Gloria found something. A way to redirect a compliment away from me. A way to tell a story about Daniel's past that conveniently centered a woman who was not me. A way to ask me questions in front of everyone that put me on the spot without technically being rude. "Madison, do you cook much at home?" "Daniel loves home-cooked meals. I raised him on them." "Madison, are you and Daniel thinking about children soon?" I ask because Daniel always said he wanted a family young. "Madison, what does your mother do?" "I don't think I've ever heard you mention her." That last one she asked in front of everyone, and she asked it knowing, she had to have known, that my mother had passed away 4 years earlier. Daniel knew. I had told Daniel everything, and Daniel loved his mother, so he talked to his mother, so his mother knew. She asked it anyway. She watched my face when I answered. I said very calmly, "My mom passed away a few years ago, but she was a nurse. She worked at Presbyterian Hospital for over 20 years. And then I picked up my fork and I kept eating. The table went quiet for just a second. Then someone changed the subject, and Gloria nodded, like she had filed the information away, and moved on. I went home that night and I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark for a long time. Daniel came and sat next to me. He said, "I know she's a lot." I said, "She asked about my mother." He was quiet. Then he said, "She probably just forgot." And I looked at him, and I didn't say anything, because there are moments when what someone says to you tells you more about what you're dealing with than anything the original person could have done. She didn't forget, and we both knew it. After that night, something changed in me. Not dramatically, not in a way that anyone could see from the outside, but I stopped trying to win Gloria over. I stopped bringing extra effort to those dinners. I stopped offering information about myself that she could use. I became very pleasant, very present, and completely unreadable. I gave her nothing. I smiled, I participated, I was kind, and I gave her absolutely nothing she could work with. She didn't like that. A woman who is used to getting reactions needs the reactions to keep going. When the reactions stop coming, she has to escalate. Gloria escalated. She started saying things directly. Not wrapped in politeness anymore, not softened by tone. Direct. "Madison, I've always thought Daniel could have done things a little differently in his life. Madison, I worry sometimes that Daniel gave up certain opportunities when he settled down so young. Madison, I want to be honest with you because I think honesty is important in a family. I had a different picture of who Daniel would build his life with, and I'm still adjusting to reality. Still adjusting to reality." That's what she said, to my face. At her kitchen table, with Daniel in the other room watching football and completely unaware that his mother was sitting across from her daughter-in-law, telling her that she was not the reality she had wanted. I looked at her. I took a sip of my coffee. I said, "I appreciate your honesty, Gloria." And then I stood up and I went to find my husband. I didn't tell him what she said. Not that day. I was still calculating. I was still watching. Because I had learned something important about Gloria by then. She was not just difficult. She was strategic. There was something underneath all of this, some fear or some agenda, and I didn't fully understand what it was yet. Until I did. The night she called me a disgrace, I finally understood everything. It was Thanksgiving. The whole family was there. Daniel's aunts, his cousins, his grandmother who was 91 years old and sharp as a tack, his uncle from Phoenix who flew in every year and always brought too much wine. The house was full and warm, and for a little while it almost felt like something I could belong to. I had made a sweet potato casserole from my grandmother's recipe. 3 people had asked me for the recipe. Even one of Gloria's sisters had pulled me aside and said, "Honey, you are a wonderful addition to this family." I had smiled so wide my face hurt. And then, after dinner, when people were moving from the table to the living room, when the noise was high and the wine had been flowing for hours, Gloria stopped me in the hallway, just the 2 of us. And she looked at me, really looked at me, top to bottom, the way you look at something you've decided you don't want in your house. And she said, "You know, Madison, I've tried to accept you. I've really tried. But you have to understand that you are not what I wanted for my son. You are not what this family is." She paused. Then she said it. "You are a disgrace to this family." I stood there for 1 second, just one, long enough to make sure I had heard her correctly, long enough to make sure I would remember every single word. Then I walked back into the living room, sat down next to Daniel's grandmother, and spent the next 40 minutes talking to her about her garden. I did not cry until we got to the car. And even then, I cried quietly, turned toward the window while Daniel drove. He asked me if I was okay. I said I was just tired. He believed me because he wanted to. That was the night I made my decision. Not a dramatic decision, not a revenge fantasy, not a plan to burn anything down. Just a quiet, firm, permanent decision. I was done being available to Gloria's cruelty. I was done absorbing it, processing it, and showing up the next time like it hadn't happened. I was done. What I did not know, what I could not have planned for, was that 6 weeks later, Gloria's world was going to fall apart, and the only person standing between her and complete destruction was going to be me. I need to tell you what happened, and I need you to understand that I am not telling it to brag. I'm telling it because it is the truth, and because the truth of it still sits heavy in my chest sometimes, even now. Gloria's brother, her older brother, Richard, had been running a business for almost 30 years, a real estate development company, mid-size, well-known in certain circles in their city. The kind of business that had the family name attached to it, the kind that came up at holiday dinners as a point of pride, the kind that Gloria referenced constantly when she was making the argument that her family was something, that her family had built something, that her family had a name worth protecting. Richard had also, for the last several years, been doing something he absolutely should not have been doing. I won't go into every detail because some of it is still legally complicated, but what I will tell you is that it involved money that wasn't his, clients who trusted him, and documents that had been altered. And by December, 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, 6 weeks after she called me a disgrace, it was about to become public. I knew because of my job. I work in financial compliance. I had for 6 years. And through a completely separate professional channel, through a case that had nothing to do with Gloria or Daniel or anyone I knew personally, I came across information that connected to Richard's company. I want to be very clear. I did not go looking for it. I did not dig into Gloria's family out of anger or spite. The information found me in the course of my professional responsibilities. And the moment I realized the connection, I had a choice to make. I could do my job exactly as required and let the process move forward without any personal intervention. That was the clean option. That was the option that had nothing to do with Gloria, or the words she had said to me in that hallway. Or I could take one additional step, not to protect Richard, because what Richard had done was wrong and the consequences were his to face, but to give the family a window, a small window of time to prepare, to get ahead of it, to have legal counsel in place before the story broke publicly, to protect, specifically, the elderly grandmother I had spent Thanksgiving talking to about her garden, and Daniel and the cousins who had no idea what was coming. I made some calls, carefully, within the boundaries of what I was allowed to do. I did not leak anything. I did not break protocol. But I used every bit of professional knowledge I had to give that family a heads up that the storm was coming and that they needed to get ready for it. And then I called Daniel. I told him everything I knew. I told him to call a lawyer. I told him to make sure his grandmother was not alone when it became public. And I told him, because he deserved to know, that the person who had quietly made sure they had time to prepare was me. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Madison, just my name. The way you say someone's name when words aren't enough." I said, "I know." He said, "She called you." I said, "I know." And I did it anyway, because that's who I am. And I needed you to know that, even if she never does. The story broke 2 weeks later. Richard faced serious consequences. It was ugly, and it was public, and it was exactly as bad as I had known it would be. The family was in crisis. Reporters called the house. Gloria's name appeared in articles because of her association with the company and her last name, and the decades she had spent publicly proud of what her brother had built. And through all of it, there was not one mention of Madison. There was not one thread that led back to me. Because I had been careful, and because I had been professional, and because I had chosen to protect people who had not protected me. Not out of weakness, not out of fear, but out of a very deliberate choice about who I wanted to be. About 3 weeks after the story broke, Gloria called me. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry. I let it ring twice before I answered. She didn't say hello. She said, "Daniel told me what you did." I said, "Okay." She said, "I don't understand why you would do that. After everything." I thought about that for a second. After everything. It was an interesting way to put it, as if the everything she was referring to was something that had happened equally to both of us. As if we had both been through something together, rather than her having done something to me. I said, "I did it because it was the right thing to do, and because Daniel needed to be protected, and because your mother doesn't deserve to spend her last years watching her family fall apart on the news without warning." Silence. Then she said, very quietly, in a voice I had never heard from her before, smaller, somehow, and careful, "I said something terrible to you, in the hallway, at Thanksgiving." I didn't help her. I didn't say, "It's okay," or "I know you didn't mean it," or any of the things women are trained to say to make the person who hurt them feel better. I just waited. She said, "I am sorry, Madison. I was wrong. I was wrong about a lot of things." I said, "Thank you for saying that," and that was it. That was the whole conversation. No tears, no dramatic reconciliation, no long speech about forgiveness and moving forward. Just a quiet acknowledgement between two women that something had happened and that it had been wrong. That was all I needed. Not because it fixed everything. It didn't fix everything. But because it was true. And because she said it without me having to ask. Daniel and I are still married. We moved to a house in a different part of the city, and we have clear boundaries now about what family visits look like and how much notice is required and what is and isn't acceptable in our home. Those conversations were hard. Some of them took more than one try, but we had them, and we are still here. Gloria and I are not close. I don't know if we ever will be, but she comes to dinner sometimes, and she knocks before she comes in, and she talks to me like a person. That is enough. Not everything has to be a fairy tale. Some things just have to be livable. What I want you to take from this, and I mean this simply, without any poetry or philosophy, just one woman talking to another, is that the most powerful thing I ever did in that situation was refuse to become something smaller than I was. I could have fought her every step of the way. I could have given her reaction after reaction, escalation after escalation. I could have made it ugly. I could have let her win by becoming someone I didn't recognize. Instead, I stayed myself. I stayed professional. I stayed clear about what I valued and who I was willing to be. And when the moment came that tested whether I actually meant any of that, when the easiest thing in the world would have been to step back and let everything fall without lifting a finger, I did what I believed was right. Not for her. For me. Because I live in the same body and the same conscience every day, and I needed to be able to look at myself without flinching. She called me a disgrace to her family, but when her family needed someone steady, someone capable, someone willing to act with integrity when it was the hardest possible option, they got me. They got exactly me. I hope you think about that the next time someone tells you that you are not enough for the space you're standing in. Sometimes the people who say that are exactly the people who will one day need to find out what you're made of. And sometimes, if you've been building yourself right, if you've been staying true to the things that actually matter, what you're made of will surprise everyone in the room, except you. It won't surprise you at all. Tell me in the comments, have you ever done something good for someone who didn't deserve it from you? And was it worth it? Because for me, it was. Not because of how she reacted, but because of how I felt after. That feeling belongs to me. Nobody can take it back.